I start? I see my picture. I'll call to order the April Finance Committee meeting. The committee is here today, which is composed of Ms. Adams, Mr. McIntosh, and Mr. Taylor, and myself, so we're all here. All committee members are participating in person because the non-committee member, Councilmember Barbara Burke, is participating virtually. The North Carolina General Statute states this meeting is a virtual or remote meeting and it's being streamed live, which I believe we're going to vote on the computer then. Okay. With that, we will start with the consent items. Ms. Adams wishes to pull C5. Are there any other items? Did you have some?
Yes, see 14, 15, and 17, and 18.
Wait a minute, 14, 15, 17, and 18. Those are being pulled. Any on the other side here, guys, anything won't be pulled? Can I get a motion to approve the balance?
Motion to approve.
Second. We have a motion to second approve the balance of the consent agenda. Please vote when it comes up on your screen. And I don't see, okay, there it is. Those are approved. Thank you very much. I will do these in numerical order. We will start with C5, if the city clerk will please read that.
C5, resolution approving the lease of Joe White Tennis Center to serve First Racket Sports, Northwest
Ms.
Florida.
Adams.
Yes, Mr. Royston, good afternoon. I know we've done this a couple of times since I've been on the council. And this time I've noticed, or we all knew, the other contractor was not going to re-up. My question is, I read all of the documentation, but who are these people? Who's the petitioners? Where are they from? Are they from here? It says Winston-Salem. Are they involved in the tennis community? What?
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, Chair, and members of the committee. The current renter that's doing who we work with at Flex Tennis at Joe White received a job offer for somewhere, and he decided to pursue those opportunities elsewhere. We did a proposal, an RFQ, and we received First Racket Sports. They said that they are from Winston-Salem. They grew up playing tennis on the courts at Kimberly Park and at other locations throughout in the city of Winston-Salem. They have roots here. They provided a dedicated program, a schedule of events for us. They're going to make use of all of our remote tennis facilities to include lessons at many locations, even outside of Joe White Tennis Center. My staff knows them and has known them for some time and feel that they would be a great fit to fill that role that Flex Tennis is vacating.
Do you mind sharing the name of the petitioner?
The name of the company is Serve First Racket Sports. I don't know if I have the names of the owners, but I can get that information to you.
If you could get that time for our Monday meeting next week.
Yeah, I can have all that information provided to you prior to council meeting.
And one more thing, they do or are willing to ensure that tennis is spread throughout the city. They, part of their programming, I guess, is to make sure that they're in the urban neighborhoods?
Mayor Pro Tem Adams' answer to that question is yes, and they also, as part of their scheduled programs, had a schedule for tennis lessons for our youth, teens, at locations far outside of Joe White Tennis Center at some of the courts that we have near Carver and 14th Street as well.
Thank you so much. I move for approval.
We have a motion to approve C5. Is there a second?
Second.
By the way, if y'all push the second thing on the screen. There we go. Please vote when it comes up. That is approved. Thank you very much. We will now go to C14. Bear with me 1 minute. We'll just do these one at a time. C14, City Clerk, will please read this one.
C14, resolution authorizing restructuring a demolition loan to the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem for the former Brown Elementary School site.
Ms. Scipio, this was yours. Do you want a presentation or what would you like?
I believe it's with all this choice neighborhood initiative that it's really good to make sure that everyone understands all of the components of what's going on. I am in favor of the restructuring, but I think it's important that we let the public know
Okay,
why we're doing that and how it
I'll ask
impacts
Ms.
the
Newman if you could
project.
give us a short presentation on C14.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Vice Chair, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the committee, council members, Mayor Joines. I'm Marla Newman, Community Development Director. This particular item is, as Councilmember Scipio alluded to, restructures the existing debt on the Brown Elementary School site. We provided some financing to cover some of the demolition on the Brown School site a few years ago when there was a fire. So the loan helped to get rid of the fire-damaged items. At that time, the loan was in a subordinate position based on the financing that will come as part of the development of the new housing. We needed to reposition the loan so that it will still be in a subordinate position, but it also now takes into account the financing that will take place to pay for the financing of the housing that's actually constructed. And there'll be tax credits on the property as well. And so this is traditional where the city's money basically comes in last. And so we're just making sure that the loan position now is to the entity that will be responsible for the housing rather than just Hawes alone. Although Hawes will pay this loan, it will pay it over the increments as we see outlined. So they have made some payments already. They will continue to make payments on the loan, but now it will just be in a different position. But they believe they'll be able to make the payments according to schedule, and we will be repaid in full.
Good, thank you. Can I get a motion from a committee member to approve this, please?
Move for approval.
Second.
We're going to vote on C14, if the committee will please vote. That is approved. Thank you. We will now go to C15, if the clerk will please read this one.
C15, resolution authorizing funding for technical assistance to establish a land bank program in Winston-Salem.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Newman, why don't you go ahead and talk about this one too while you're here?
Yes, sir. So this particular item, I made reference to it actually when we did our housing workshop back the end of February, that in connection with this one, the For Everyone Home policy documents that were adopted by Council June of last year, one of the action recommendations was the creation of a land bank. So at this time, we reached out to the University of North Carolina School of Government, their Development Finance Initiative, because they do actually have some expertise in helping other local governments in the creation of a land bank. And so this action is brought to you to fulfill the action item that you all approved June of last year and provide staff with the technical assistance to actually put together the mechanics of what a land bank could look like. That action that they do, the work that they do, will then come back to you for consideration and your action at a later date. But this provides some of the know-how that current staff does not have the capacity to do. So we reached out to this governmental entity that had expertise in this arena for assistance.
Any other questions?
Yes, I think you just answered. It's not that we're actually going to form a land bank, but it's to put together the information on what it would look like if we are the entity that has a land bank.
Correct. How the land bank would be structured, whether it should be within city government or outside of city government. If within city government, potentially recommendations on the department it might be housed in, how it might be staffed, and all of those kinds of things. So I believe that at the end of the day, we'll receive a series of options that the council can then choose from in terms of what makes the most sense for Winston-Salem.
And how does that connect to the discussions we've had on city-owned property being designated for affordable housing?
It could be the place where that city-owned property is held and then actually programmed. So depending, again, on how the land bank is structured, there could be recommendations on how we might dispose of the property, be it for development purposes or for sale purposes, but that would be a potential holding place for the existing city property as well as any other potential property we might acquire.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. McIntosh?
Having worked with the school government several times in the past, as a lot of us have, I have a lot of respect for them. I'm really looking forward to this assessment. I think it'll provide us very good guidelines. I think the challenge will be that council stick to those guidelines and not ignore them after we've paid good money to have them brought to us.
Thank you. Can I get a motion on this from a committee member?
Move for approval.
Second.
Second, motion and a second. If you'll please vote when it comes up. Thank you very much. That is approved. Thank y'all very much. We will now go to C17. If the clerk will please read this one.
C17, resolution authorizing funding for pre-development services for 2 sites.
Ms. Newman, since you're here, please continue.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Tony, we'll get you in sometime.
So this is a separate pre-development proposal looking at 2 sites. Again, these were also highlighted in the housing workshop. The first being the 5.3 acres recently purchased on Peters Creek Parkway, between Peters Creek Parkway and Sides Road, as well as potentially what had been the Delta Vision site. We still own or have a lien position on that property in conjunction with another entity. That other entity does not want to develop. They're not in the development business. And so they have been looking for ways to dispose of the property. And so we thought it would be beneficial if the city were to look at what are the highest and best uses of that property so that any potential development ideas that the council would want to entertain, you have a good running start on what makes the most sense for a parcel of that size if we're able to obtain complete ownership of it from the initiative that we share first position with. Certainly, if for whatever reason that particular site falls out of consideration before any work is undertaken, we are also looking at some other potential sites for development here in the city, be it with city-owned property or some other potential properties that we could entertain acquiring. And so those services then could just be translated over to any other potential site. But again, this provides some pre-development services at a really good price. Generally, when developers come in and they do it from cradle to grave, the development fee is usually much higher. Development fees can range anywhere from 8 to 14, 15%, depending on the deal. With this flat fee that the School of Government has proposed for the upfront development, pre-development services is far less expensive than what it would be if we were to allow a developer to do the whole project, again, from cradle to grave. They do have built in that once a project is actually selected by a developer to do, and the council has approved that developer, then they would, from the developer side, make a 1% fee, which again is far less expensive than if we had the entire program managed by a private developer. So on the back end, the 1% fee is paid out of the development side, not by the city.
Ms. Newman, I was concerned. I thought the price sounded high. They're not moving dirt or anything, are they? They just doing stuff on paper.
Oh, no, it's more than on paper. They hold the community meetings. They do a lot of the demographic and other research. They look at how you stack the capital, what capital is necessary to get the job done. So they take it all the way up to and including the development of the RFP for the developer. So all that needs to happen after their work is we select a developer and the project to go into the ground. So all of the legwork, the preliminary legwork that a developer would ordinarily do, they're doing that for us or on our behalf at a much reduced cost than what it would be if we paid that developer outright to take the whole kit and caboodle, as they say.
Yeah. Anyway, any other questions, comments, Ms. Adams?
Yes, I think this is great because what I found out with my peers across the country, this is the new way to do this. City, we don't have the staff to pull to do this work. This is the grunt work, and especially our community development department. So what this does, as Ms. Newman says, is gives us a running start, but it also gives us a prototype launch benchmark as we move forward, whether any of us are here in the next 5 to 10 years, this is the new way of how cities are going to build, develop housing and other things throughout the city. I think it's a great idea. I was one of the ones that communicated it to our community development and the city manager. I'm like, we have the University of North Carolina School of Government. Over the 13 years, they have become well-versed, and they've had to pivot as to what services they offer cities. So I think Winston-Salem is doing taking a great stand to go ahead and get this done, because what they're going to also do, as Ms. Newman said, they're not going to also work with the community, the citizens. They're going to work with the council to help us understand what development really is and how we can make good choices. Again, kudos to staff, department. Thank you so much.
Mr. McIntosh.
From a cost standpoint, to me, this is a bargain. This is a deal. We get a very professional outfit who comes to us and is in our corner, who's telling us what they believe, not based on a commission. To me, this also, to some degree, stands in for a statement of value that you would get from a broker. And if we were to work through a broker on this, you're talking a minimum of 6%. So 6% of the land value, the deal value could be significantly higher than that. Plus, like I say, they're looking out for us. They're not in it for themselves. It's a set price. I'm very comfortable with this. Thank you.
Mr. Larson, did you have a question?
Be better off. Thank you. That as we look at the Peters Creek as a commercial corridor, Sides Road is a residential corridor. We're not going to get access off of Peters Creek unless DOT changes their position. So I think we ought to start referring to this as a Sides Road development. Second of all, I think when the council looked at this, we talked about priority being given to home ownership, particularly the idea of something innovative like cottage courtyards or tiny houses is something that the city has not done previously. And we're really looking for a home ownership option as a priority on this.
Yes.
That needs to be clearly stated up front, I think.
It will. That is part of the resolution that council adopted, so they will have to be governed by that resolution.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Scipio?
Yeah, Ms. Newman, I'm very much in favor of this action because the 34 acres is in the East Ward. However, there is a contract on that property as we speak. First phase of due diligence ends April the 15th with a possible closing in May from an out-of-state developer who may or may not have a lot of resources to move on it. I would like to suggest that if we vote to move this forward, that you really talk to the realtor and see how you might be able to work with that possible developer, if they're going to be able to go through with the purchase or not. I do know they offered the full price that was being listed for. I don't believe we should pay that much, but I think that we should move forward working with that realtor and his relationship with the persons who've put it under contract.
Yes, ma'am. We're in communication with Institute Capital, and we were not at the table, actually, when that deal was negotiated. I think there was a breakdown in communication. So we are now scheduled to meet with them next week to have a conversation about what happens and how we go forward together.
So I just have a question for, I guess, Attorney Carmen. That property, the Institute received the property because no one bought it at foreclosure. Did that maintain our position after the foreclosure? Or did our position go away since the Institute made the purchase?
No, we're still in a shared first position with them. That's why we're a little surprised in terms of what has transpired, but hopefully we'll get some answers next week.
Well, that's great to know, because that puts us in a different position. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions or comments? Can I get a motion on this, please?
Move for approval.
Second.
The motion is second. Everybody, please vote when it comes up. And that does pass 3-1. I will comment that we just sold 72 acres for $8 million, and I think we ran an ad in the paper to do that. I think the land, particularly on Sides Road or Peters Creek, could be sold easily with an ad in the paper. But if y'all want to spend $181,000, that's your money, not mine. We'll continue with C-18, please.
C-18, resolution authorizing permanent financing for an 81-unit family rental development in Phase 1 of the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative.
Ms. Newman, I would say this is the end, but it may not be. This is just consent. Please.
Yes, sir. So before you is an action to consider the investment of home dollars into the Choice Neighborhoods development in Phase 1, which is the Brown Elementary School site. This had come to you previously for approval of the CDBG dollars and the bond dollars. What we discovered post-approval was that HUD had some concerns about the level of HUD dollars, or Choice Neighborhood dollars, that the developer was asking to invest into this first phase, and asked if there was a way we could look at some additional investment by the city that would reduce the amount of Choice dollars in Phase 1 so that more would be available in the future phases. So we were able to identify home dollars that could take the place of what originally had been some of the C&I dollars from HUD. And so this action then approves kind of replacing $500,000 of what was HUD dollars to still make the deal pencil.
Any questions or comments, Ms. Scipio?
I guess this whole initiative is so complicated. What is the city's investment? Is it $6 million that we have to put in?
That was our initial commitment. Yes, ma'am. $3 million of CDBG and $3 million of GO bonds.
Okay. And now we're still making that, and in addition to this 500.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the majority of the CDBG and GO bonds have been front-loaded in this particular phase so that all of the funding could be in place. And like I said, HUD just asked that a little less of the HUD dollars be used in the front phases, and we were able to identify the availability of home funds that could help that out.
And I do have one more question.
Just go right ahead.
General partner equity, $100. Who is that?
That is basically the housing authorities piece.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
Mr. McIntosh.
Could you tell us what the source of CDBG and home funds are? I mean, I think we all know, but it'd be good for the public to know.
Yes, sir. So CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, are dollars from HUD. We get an annual allocation of HUD dollars. Home is Home Investment Partnership. They are also dollars from HUD, and we receive an annual allocation of those dollars. And so when we have what we call program income, when some of the loans have been repaid, when we make loans using those dollars, then that enables us to come to the table like today to be able to help close that gap.
So we're moving federal funds around.
That is correct.
In a completely legal, above-board way.
That is correct. The federal funds that are ours to program versus the federal funds that HUD keeps its hand on and directs when and how they're invested.
And while these come out of our federal income taxes, they don't come from our local property taxes.
That's correct.
Or our GO bonds.
No, the federal funds, the CDBG and the home funds are totally federal. They have no local character at all.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Just one more question. The Brown School monies that was in C14, could it not have been applied to this for the demolition?
Separate pots, this is development side.
But isn't the demolition of the buildings part of the development of the 81 units?
That is a part of the bigger picture, but this particular action is just for the actual development of the site.
Okay, thank you.
Just a general comment about the entire project. We know we've thrown out $46 million is kind of what we've got to come up for all 5 or 6 sections, whatever they are, and that we're going to be working on that 8 to 9 million, I think it was, for phase 2 within the next month or so. I'll just make the general comment that we have a number of different pots to pull money from, and I'm depending on staff to do the homework and decide which one is most appropriate. My concern is when we were in Washington, there was a lot of rumbling that local municipalities and states were not spending the ARPA money or the COVID money as rapidly as they expected. And we could be using one of those pots for this. You've decided to use home funds, but keep in mind, I don't want to wake up one morning and find that Washington's pulling back all the money that we could have used on phases 1, 2, 3, whatever, because we, for some reason, selected this pot versus the state's given us a pot of money, we've set aside a pot of money, et cetera. So it does make a difference, I think, what pots you take it out of, and I think that hopefully will not be an issue for a while, but I think it's coming down the road at some point that, spend it or lose it. With that, I trust you on it. Yes.
Just a quick question, thank you. As a follow-up to that, do those pots of money that we're talking about from the federal government, is that an annual allocation? Does the same thing apply if you don't spend it, that it goes back to the federal government, or does it roll forward? How does that work?
It rolls forward for a period of time. So with the home dollars, those are usually tied directly to projects, and then those projects have a certain time frame to get completed, or else you can lose it. With CDBG, we are charged to spend a certain amount every year, and it can be from the direct allocation or any program income. As long as we hit a certain threshold, the money continues to just roll forward. So that's one reason why we were able to commit the amount of money that we have in CDBG to choice neighborhoods. So because we were able to combine the pots of money and roll it forward. Right now, what we're finding, and not just here in Winston, but in some other communities, Raleigh, Durham, and others, and because these dollars actually go to projects, with some of the projects, they have been delayed, therefore we've been delayed in spending the money. The money's been allocated and obligated, it just hasn't been actually spent. And HUD looks at what's actually spent. And so we're working with them, as are some of our peer cities that I've been in touch with, to make sure that we get those dollars spent as we should within a relevant amount of time. We usually have a spring deadline. We're going to be past that deadline, but we'll still get those dollars out the door, especially anything that was tied to choice, which was a significant part of the budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
sir.
Can I get a motion on this, please?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second on, this is C18. Everybody please vote. That is approved. Thank you very much. That's all for the consent. We have 3 items on the general agenda. If the city clerk will please read G1.
G1, resolution approving an application for North Carolina Drinking Water State Revolving Fund loans associated with the Nielsen Water Treatment Plant Modernization Project.
Who would like to present on this?
Good evening, Chair Clark, Mayor Jones, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and members of the City Council. I'm Kelly Latham, Deputy Financial Officer. The item you have before you is a resolution that will allow the city to apply for a $21,870,000 loan from the North Carolina Clean Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Program. This is for the Nielsen Water Treatment Plant Modernization Project. In February, Council approved a resolution to accept a loan of $100 million for a term of 20 years at 1.02%. This additional loan application, if approved, will bridge the gap and allow us to fully fund the Nielsen project with the state loans at the same terms of 1.02% for 20 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Good money. And I believe the state comes up with these large pools of money, and we apply for them. And this is, look at Ms. Driver, probably the fourth or fifth time, maybe? Sixth time, okay. Thank you very much.
Chair.
Yes, Mr. McIntosh.
Just quickly, if you could just tell the folks, who pays this loan back? Where does the funding come from?
The funds are available in the Water and Sewer Fund to pay back the loan.
But those funds they come from your water bill?
Yes.
Okay.
Customer charges.
It's an enterprise fund that pays for
Exactly.
itself. Again, it does not come from property taxes.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And what's great about this money, it has a very, very low interest rate. Thank you very much. Can I get any questions or comments? Can I get a motion to approve G1 then?
Move to approve.
Second.
Everybody please vote when it comes up. Thank y'all very much. We'll now go to G2, our city funds. Oh, clerk can read it.
G2, resolution authorizing city funds for Phase 2 of the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative.
Ms. Newman, you're back. If you'll please present this to the.
Yes, sir. So as Phase 1 is about to start construction and ground clearance and the like in the next couple of weeks, we also need to get started on Phase 2. One of the first requirements with Phase 2 is the submission of an application for low-income housing tax credits with the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. One of the requirements to go along with that application is that the developer has to show that all sources of funds to complete that phase of development are committed. We had conversations with the developer and with Hawes, and Kevin Cheshire with Hawes is here in the audience with us this evening. It was identified that there was an $8.4 million gap to have all of the funds in place so that the Phase 2 could be completed as designed. One of the things that we're here today to discuss is the city's ability to assist in closing that gap in funding for Phase 2 of the development. Council's action then would ultimately, if approved, result in a commitment letter that would be issued to the developer, and that commitment letter would accompany the tax credit application that is due approximately May 13th of next month. So we are looking at a variety of sources, again, to meet this gap. We're looking at another allocation of home funds for $500.
Ms. Newman, can you hold a second? Can we bring up page 2 of the staff report that has all these shown?
No, that CARF.
Picture's worth 1,000 words here.
Page 2.
Or table.
Or, yeah, this is not a picture. There we go. Thank you. Now, Ms. Newman, if you could please.
Yes, page 2.
Well, it was there. There we go.
Go back.
Thank you very much. If you'll please comment
Thank
on
you.
that.
So the city, on top of the tax credit equity, number 3, that's the part that the state would provide. And just so you'll know that the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency actually has agreed to do a set-aside for choice neighborhoods, an annual set-aside of tax credits. We do still have to submit an application, however, and still show that sufficient funding is in place to complete the the development. You'll see a line for choice neighborhood funds, so those are the HUD funds that HUD directs. And then the first mortgage is the bank loan that the developers would take out. So below that number, the line number 4, home, much like we did just now for phase 1, we would allocate $500,000 of home funds. Then we would look at allocating $495,344 of ARPA funding. We would utilize $3.4 million of economic development funding. Our second allocation of GO bonds, which is part of that $3 million commitment we made previously, that allocation for phase 2 would be $288,890. Our Cdbg commitment, again, part of that $3 million we committed at the beginning of the project, would come in at $375,000, and then the general partner equity again, for a total of development sources of $22,487,944. And so it is this financing scheme that would go to the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, and each of those that has the city's name beside it would be part of the commitment letter that would accompany the actual application for tax credits.
Thank you. Comments, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was the one that went to the governor and asked him to set aside those things so we can't lose that tax credit. But I'm in favor of this cobbling together all the dollars. But as I said in the last meeting, I hope we're not setting a precedent to be using our economic development funds for non-economic development projects. We're out of sites here in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. We need to be developing some sites, or otherwise we're not going to have a chance to recruit new companies. And, you know, we're in a real sweet spot here relative to the Toyota battery manufacturer, the Boom supersonic aircraft manufacturer, because the suppliers want to be within like 30 miles to 60 miles away from the plant. So, again, I'm in support of this, but I hope we're not setting a precedent. We're going to start using our economic development funds for non-economic development projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Scipio, and then I'll come this way.
Ms. Newman, is the ARPA housing of that $4,495,000, is that out of the $30 million that we set aside?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And we had $10 million from the state that came on top of our $20 million. And you may not know this, but you might. How much more money is left in economic development out if we put $3.4 million in this? How much is left for other economic development projects? Because it seems like we could put in that 3.4 out of our ARPA money. That's how I'm seeing.
I would defer to the city manager on the economic development fund.
Good evening, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joins, Member Tim Adams, members of City Council. In that fund with the $8 million that will be deposited from the sale of Union Cross, and then we subtract that's 4.5, you got about 5.6 left in economic development funds, as well as we've got some GO bonds as well remaining. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Garrity, could you give us those numbers for the Monday meeting?
absolutely, we'll give you all that.
Thank you. Ms. Adams, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair Clark. Again, this boils down to how serious we are about housing, affordable housing. You know, if we don't take monies from different pots, if somebody or someone has some other pots with substantial money, then I'm sure, as Councilmember Clark said earlier, staff will find it and give us some choices. But right now, we're almost between a rock and a hard place 2 weeks away. This resolution has to be in the hands of not just HUD, but the North Carolina Financing Association. And if we blink, again, unlike other cities, you know, we can't afford to blink on quality of life and housing. We know that with the addition of these new companies coming to the Triad, there is a rippling effect, much like BMW in Greenville or anywhere else. But if we're not prepared to absorb some of the folks when they come from out of the state or wherever to want to work in these places, then we're going to lose out. But we can't always assume that everybody's making $100,000 a year that's going to be working in this this area of these new mega site plants. You have to assume that everybody won't qualify as an engineer with an engineering degree, a chemist, or any of those things. There are still jobs, majority, that have to be done with people that are making less than or at $15 an hour. So again, I'm going to build on what Chair Clark said. I commend staff again of trying to put together something for us to look at. But again, I ask the council to be intentional about the housing. It seems like we're kicking a can and we can never get further than a block that we stop and say, are we really wanting to do this? Are we ready to do this? How committed are we to this? I know that we have to develop economic sites within Forsyth County or the city, but at the end of the day, you can't put everything on that when people like me that represent a bunch of people in my ward of this city that have yet really to see the economic development or the trickle-down effect of what we've been doing for the past, 20 plus years. Sometimes we got to take a different point of view. Sometimes we got to change direction a little bit so that the little folks can see that we care about them. And I think, again, when housing is not one of the number one things in America that can change your life, quality of housing, I think the council needs to just, again, give staff, recognize that they're doing the best they can with what they got to work with to try to give us some choices so we can continue to improve the quality of life of the least of us in this community, the working class, the middle income, and all of this. Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Any other comments? Ms. Scipio?
Ms. Newman, I know this is phase 2. Is it possible let's think about 3 and 4? I don't know if the city was thinking about having to put in as much money in phase 1 and in phase 2 for choice neighborhoods. We know we don't have anything to do with inflation and the supply chain issues that are impacting the construction of this. But was there some discussion about what our commitment must be for phase 3 and 4, whatever the next several phases are, so we'll know that we're looking at and having to invest even more dollars after this? I am really in favor of using the ARPA dollars for whatever our match needs to be, as opposed to economic development. We can build houses, but if people don't have jobs to be able to afford those houses, I think that's a remiss on our part, that we really need to do a tandem in this. We've got to figure out how to have better paying jobs for folks and elevate them. But if we could figure out, I would like to know what it looks like for our commitment after phase 2.
Yes, ma'am. We have had some preliminary conversations, and we've really made it clear that based on our housing study and needs assessment, Winston has a tremendous need outside of choice, and that we have to address, and that we're challenging the developer to get more creative and innovative and partner with us in finding a solution that maybe isn't as dependent upon city funds.
Thank you. Councilmember Burke, you have the floor out there, wherever you are.
Thank you so much, Chair Clark. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and my colleagues on the council. I just want to say I echo everything that Mayor Pro Tem said, and I want to say thank you to Ms. Newman and to her staff for creating this preliminary list of resources. And I do ask my colleagues on the council to let this choice neighborhood initiative be a priority for us and trust staff to continue to look for resources and opportunities to close these funding gaps. And I just wanted to express thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're all in favor of housing on this, and we've dedicated millions of dollars, ARPA money and other sources to try to address it. My question really evolves around the balance between economic development and jobs and the amount of money we've already set aside for housing and how the decision was made basically to balance those two lines in the 4.4 versus the 3.4 for economic development, which seems to be equally important. We seem to have a pot of money in housing available, and why are we tapping then into the economic development money at this point in time?
Excuse me. Councilman Larson, let me explain. I'll take that question because that was kind of my recommendation in consultation with members of City Council and trying to balance the needs of the community. There are, as Ms. Newman pointed out, this council is committed to 750 new affordable housing units a year over the next 10 years. That's a significant investment, even if you limit it to $20,000 per unit. We don't have nearly that amount of funding already available, ARPA or otherwise. And so trying to balance the needs for affordable housing much further down the line than just choice neighborhood, to find ways to fund choice neighborhood and still reserve some funding for all these other proposals that we're working on throughout the city. So that was that kind of balance. By law, we're required the bond money from the sale of the Union Cross property. We have to put at least 3.8 back into economic development because that's what we paid for the property with bond money. So we're putting 4.5 in instead. So it's a little more than the 3.8. We also do have some GO bonds available for economic development. So it was kind of that balance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If I can make a comment, and I'm going to address the elephant in the room that no one has beat the bush around, and it is simply this, that the choice neighborhoods with the current budget we have given is going to eat up every penny we have set aside, and we've set aside not pennies, tens of millions of dollars for housing. We set aside 20 of the 50 million we got on ARPA. We got another 10 million from the state. That's 30. I can't give you when we sold the bonds in 2018, there was a couple of million in there, and we've got Cdbg that we get every year and home we get every year. You can add them all up, but the number that we've been given with the choice neighborhoods is a gap of $46 million, and you pretty much have to add up all those buckets to get there. And while it is a great project, I think it's our number one project. It is, however, not the only housing project we would like to do. But unfortunately, it's an expensive one given some things that have happened in the world that we had no control over, and that's basically lumber's doubled and metals tripled and everything else that's kind of going on in the world right now. I do think the staff is working very hard to try to find some new buckets, and that may be some private sector money. I'm not sure what we're looking at, but we're looking at all of it. But I would express the concern that's been expressed by several folks up here, and that is the reason we sold that property for $8 million is because we had the $3.2 million or whatever it was to buy it. And if we didn't have that $3 million 4 years ago, we couldn't have bought it. And not only are we getting some nice jobs out of it, but we more than got our money back. So I do not want to shortchange our economic development work. Without good jobs, it doesn't matter how many houses you build, they will not be affordable if you don't have a good job to afford them. But I recognize this dilemma we have, and that what appears to be at the current situation, that a very nice project is going to eat up an awful lot of the pie, a lot more than we thought. And we've just got to continue to encourage our staff to see what we can do to mitigate that. Having said that, we have to approve this Monday night, and so I do endorse what is presented with the caveat that I am concerned with the long-term use of economic development here. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Chair Clark. Again, it's not without thought that staff and city council and everyone have been working with our federal representatives. We've had conversations. My request, Mr. Rao, Ms. Martin, Ms. Tony, and others, and Mr. Garrity, my advice to you guys is to pick up the phone again and call them and tell them what we're about to do on Monday night. And we need, and Mr. Cheshire, you too, in the back, that they need to understand that we're up against the wall. Again, the money from the economic sale of the land. If the council says no to that, the majority, I'm good with that. But my next question is, okay, so where are we gonna get this other money from? You know, that's the mindset we have to be in now, that there may be a situation where we don't have the money presently. If you add up that $22 million price tag on this project for 72 units, that's about $31,000 to build a unit, basically. And in today's world, that's cheap. So I just need us to understand again that we need to reach back out to those people that we had the conversations with in Washington, as well as the ones in Raleigh, and look for some other forms of income revenue as to how we're going to get this done. But again, we're against the wall. Monday, it's go. It's a go.
Can I get a motion on,
I move for approval.
what are we on here, G2? Do I have a
Second.
second? Any other comments? If not, will you please vote when it comes up? Thank you. And this will be on the agenda for the full council Monday night. We will now go to the last item, which is G3. If City Clerk, please read that.
G3, information regarding fiscal year 2022-2023 trial balance budget.
Mr. Tesh, you have the floor. Oh, Mr. Garrity, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Clark. Let me make just a couple introductory comments. It's budget time again today.
Yay!
Today we have the trial balance budget, and it's important that you think about those terms. It's not a recommended budget. That won't come to you till mid to late May. This is a trial balance budget, but it is balanced. You'll see that we are taking advantage of a good economy, which is helping us to balance this budget. But you'll also see some modest potential tax adjustments in this trial balance budget. It's driven by several things: fuel prices, as we all know. It's also our commitment to public safety and the need to significantly increase our compensation to public safety as well as to other areas of city government. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Test to go through it. We will be following up individually with all of you after this to kind of hear your individual thoughts and dreams. Thank you. Scott.
So this is for information only.
It is.
We'll not be voting for a while. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the committee and council. As Mr. Garrity said, we have the trial balance budget for the general fund before you today. It was about 2 weeks ago. We were discussing capital needs, both funded and unfunded in draft form. So looking at some of those on the general fund side today, if the city clerk would advance the slide. I'm going to touch briefly on some major revenue assumptions, look at sales tax and property tax, our two main revenue sources in the general fund, what is in the base budget at this point, some expansion items that are not a part of the base budget, and then look at the calendar and next steps. So moving to the next slide. Generally, at this point, we show some sort of projection for general fund balance. What you see here is the June 30th, 2021 actual. And then a projection for the year end here in FY22. You will see there a significant increase in fund balance. There are a couple of reasons for this. This visualization is a little different than what you normally see. What I will draw your attention to is that light blue $5.7 million says assigned for Arpa Framework. If you'll remember, we did a little bit of switching funds between the Arpa fund, using it for public safety salaries. So that amount of money is sitting in the general fund. However, we are showing it as being spendable for that framework, as we've discussed. Showing $5.6 million potentially in FY23, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, for some very specific needs on the capital maintenance side. And then you see the light green at $4.1 million, which would be projected unassigned fund balance at the end of 22. I will note that this is a projection. We don't know what those numbers look like until we get to the end of the year, but potentially adding to unassigned fund balance as well, even with using some of that money for those capital needs. Next slide. So to discuss sales tax, we've talked about this a couple of times, but looking at where we are currently and what we're projecting for FY23, as you can see in the bullet points on the side there, the growth this year in quarters 1 and 2 compared to those same quarters in the prior year is roughly 14%. That's pretty substantial compared to where we normally are. January's growth was down to 7%. We don't have the official report yet to know whether that's just distributions going down or changes in refunds or things of that nature. We are somewhat conservatively projecting 5% for the months February through June to year end, and then a 3% growth rate in distributions to the county for the following year, for fiscal year 23. So you see that 5.1, which is not the 3 I just talked about. When we did revaluation and changed our tax rate, that changed the ad valorem distribution of sales tax within the county. So even though we're projecting sales to go up 3%, or those distributions to the county, we actually get a little bit more based on how the ad valorem distribution works out. So note there, I think we're being relatively conservative to what some of our peers may be doing. We will keep an eye to what the Charlottes, Raleighs, Durhams, and Greensboros are doing, but I think right now it's a relatively conservative projection. So moving to the next slide. The property tax base, as estimated by the Forsyth County Tax Office, will draw your attention to the top line for projected 23, and it's a little less than 1% growth year to year. That is less than what we would normally expect to see organic growth in a non-revaluation year, as you can see in fiscal years 19, 20, and 21, averaging 2% or a little more. I think that's usually where we're at. We do know there is another projection coming from the county tax office, and they will have a better handle on some of the business personal property listings. So we are hopeful that that number will increase, but the trial balance budget is balanced using the current property tax base increase of just under a percentage point. Next slide. So we're talking about a balanced budget here, overall general fund budget of nearly $250 million. A note there, it does include that one-time, again, $5.6 million transfer out for capital. So getting into the weeds and details, the next slide, we'll look at the personnel changes, budget to budget. You notice there an almost 10% increase, or $14.7 million. Several bullet points below on why, but I do also want to draw your attention to the salary savings adjustment, that we are increasing that by nearly $900,000 to help balance the budget. We are seeing a substantial amount of turnover in the city, and so increasing the salary savings adjustment to help balance the budget is not something that should cause us a problem in fiscal year 23. Noting what is in the personnel side here, average 3.8% merit for non-sworn and non-certified personnel, so the everyday employee. Includes all of the required contributions to the different retirement funds that we have to do. We have a future slide here on the $7.2 million that you will see for sworn police and certified fire. That's going to be different than that merit adjustment for other city employees. 15 new positions in the budget. Again, details on those as well as this budget includes the removal of the flat rate pay plan, which actually took effect here in fiscal year 22, under which certain seasonal employees or temporary staff were not paid the $15 an hour. That has been remediated, and all city employees will get that minimum wage. Next slide. So the new positions that you see as part of the budget, there are 3 in recreation and 2 in vegetation management. These are related to additional park amenities coming online in fiscal year 23. So a crew in recreation, as well as a 2-person crew in veg management to deal with maintenance. 4 additional positions for community development and housing, many of those related to the things that Ms. Newman is talking to you about at this very point. A rapid response abatement crew, potentially also in community development, that could deal with immediate abatement issues. 2 additional positions in planning and development services related to the inspections workload that we are seeing, and 1 language access coordinator to specifically do Hispanic community outreach in the Human Relations and DEI department, for a total of $1.3 million, and those do include supplies, vehicle cost, and things of that nature. So it's not just the salary and benefits, it's the full amount for those positions to do their jobs. Next slide, please. So talking in higher level terms about police and fire, a career ladder or STEP program. Currently, if you were to look at, say, the police pay plan, you would see a police officer and then a corporal. This would create potentially a police officer 2 position and a senior police officer position between police officer and corporal to have the ability to move up. There are other components of that plan that we are still working out the details for. What you see at the bottom there, the merit and normal public safety supplement would have been about $3.25 million. So we are using that for this portion of sworn and certified salary increases. An additional $0.50, which yields nearly $4 million to create $7.2 million for sworn police and certified fire pay adjustments. We will have the details of this coming with the budget, but when the manager talked about a modest property tax increase, this is where it is being seen. Next slide. Kept this very similar to what you saw in the early budget forecast, tried to use almost the exact same table. Again, we know that there's a significant increase in the recycling contract. We will have several months of that being transitioned to in-house at the end of fiscal year 23, and the budget will reflect that, as well as the one-time cost with starting that program. We'll draw your attention, we still have an additional $1 million in vehicle replacement. We'll show you on a future slide how many vehicles were requested for replacement that we are not able to make it to. Something new in this, the fuel at $1 million in the general fund. We're very hopeful, as is everyone, that those fuel costs will go down. Not knowing what that future looks like, we have put $1 million into the general fund just for regular and unleaded for operations. Again, fire dispatch services at roughly $400,000. I do believe there will be an item to public safety to go through that as well, and a few increases in the economic development project incentive payments that have already been approved by council in the last year or 2. Next slide, please. On the other side of that, so we talked about how well sales tax is doing. So you see almost a $10 million increase in sales tax budget to budget. Again, property taxes includes that roughly just less than 1% base growth, as well as the $0.50 on the tax rate. We have balanced the budget also using a recycling fee of $2.50 per collection point per month. That will help offset the cost of the recycling program increase that we will have. It's actually taken place in fiscal year 22, but will continue into 23. We do see recycling commodities. That number is a little bit higher than what you saw in the early forecasts. The commodities market is doing very well. However, it is also very volatile, so we just need to keep our eyes on that and be careful. I think it is budgeted relatively conservatively at this point. I don't feel comfortable going any higher, but it did go up just a little bit from the early forecast. Construction permits, again, you saw the 2 positions that we were showing in planning and development services. That's relative to the workload and the increase in revenues that you see in that department. ABC revenues are up. And lastly, something we've not seen in quite some time, an actual decrease in indirect cost allocation. That's relative to the turnover that we have. So indirect cost allocation is based on actuals from prior years. So as general fund services like the city attorney's office or budget, finance, HR have some amount of turnover, that gets pushed to our enterprise departments. There was also a change in organization under which a city attorney was budgeted directly in the utilities department, and we made a change for that. So next slide. The table of exactly what revenues and expenditures look like at a very high level. So what you see is an 11% increase budget to budget. Again, I would draw your attention to the fact that $5.6 million of that increase is in one-time capital for severe deferred maintenance needs. But you do see the changes in property taxes and sales taxes, as well as, again, a 9% increase overall in personnel. Next slide. So what is not in the trial balanced budget? Again, we had that 1.5 cent increase on the property tax rate to help with public safety adjustments. What we have here are a significant amount of vehicle replacement requests from departments that we cannot fund. roughly equating 2 cents on the tax rate to do those. Again, additional position requests, which we have another slide on as well, at more than 2 cents on the tax rate. And there are additional recruitment and retention incentives that council has seen in information items that are not specifically in the base budget. However, we may be able to deal with some of those via salary savings adjustment. We have increased the salary savings adjustment, but there may be a little bit of opportunity to continue to use salary savings based on the amount of turnover we have. So going to the next page, we will look specifically at those positions that were not funded. So again, 15 in the base budget, but another 86 requested by departments that did not make it into the base budget, a significant number of them being in fire operations and admin, but also additional positions in recreation and parks for maintenance, in sanitation for additional routes and refuse, additional opportunities, 3 positions in public safety IS, a couple in human resources, 3 in CityLink. I will note, I think that's supposed to be 2, and one of those is technically a reclassification, so we'll make sure that we get that correct, and potentially an additional request in emergency management related to things that we've seen, things like the Weaver Fire that have increased some of their workload over time. So again, none of these positions are in the base budget. These would all be expansionary items for future consideration if you wanted to. Next slide. So just pushing up the calendar, again, as the manager said, be about a month and a half, we'll be back to you with his recommended budget. I would like to take a point of personal privilege and say thank you to the budget staff that is working very hard at this point. If they would stand up for 1 second. Meredith, Sarah, Renee, and Jordan.
Here, here.
There's a new person at the helm, and so it is always fun when you have a new person at the helm. They have been absolutely wonderful and will be in the coming weeks and months as we develop this budget and put it before you for approval.
And you will be meeting with the council members individually in the next weeks, several weeks.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any additional initial questions? Mr.
Monday.
Monday. It's a long day. It's a long Monday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question on property taxes. What happens as brick and mortar sales migrate to online sales? Do we still get the full value of that property tax, or are we at risk of losing any of this property tax we're budgeting if it goes away from being spent physically on soil in Winston-Salem Forsyth County?
So the real estate portion of the property tax base is based on the land that's there and the improved value that's on it. To the extent at some point that the improved value loses some of that value, you could in FY23. I don't think that's a significant problem for us.
Are we talking about the same thing? I'm talking about sales tax.
I'm sorry, I thought you said property tax.
No, if I did, I misspoke. I'm sorry. I'm talking about sales tax specifically.
So my understanding from NCDOR is that a lot of those sales that are happening, we are collecting sales tax on now. In previous years, we would not have, so things like Amazon or if you buy from eBay, they should be coded to where you have purchased them. I think some of the sales tax increase that we've seen statewide is related to higher collection rates for online sales. I don't know that that's something specifically that we would need to worry about at this point.
Good, thank you.
Mr. McIntosh.
And just as a byline, Airbnb and VRBO both collect and remit sales tax on those transactions. So that's something that we get. It goes to the state, and then we get our portion. So we revalued in 2022. That's every 4-year process. So we'll see that again in 2026.
Yes.
I know it's way too early to talk about it, but I would imagine that our downtown offices are still suffering from pretty high vacancy rate, which will affect a lot of things, but it will also sort of dramatically impact the amount of money that the bid, the Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership gets, since that's funded by those values. I think we just need to keep in mind that we may be asked to step up again this year as we did last year. I think we chronically underfund our downtown partnership compared to our peers, so we just need to keep that in mind.
Councilmember McIntosh, I would say that the property tax base for the bid went down in FY '22, but has rebounded based on the county tax office estimates for FY '23. So hopefully we don't have the same problem in '23 we had in '22, but that may be a problem in the future. I know that Mr. Burgess over at the county is trying to get his hands wrapped around not just the commercial side of things, but what's happening on the residential side for revaluation 3 years from now as well.
Great. Mr. Mayor, you had a comment?
Just real quickly, I think Scott's right. The property tax increase is very, very conservative on the tax assessor's part, but we had a record year. We had $1 billion of permitted construction for the first time in history, so hopefully that's going to translate. I realize those are still being built now, but I think that's going to translate into a little higher property tax growth than we are showing here, hopefully.
We have regular meetings with Mr. Burgess about that, and so we have questioned him and are looking to see the tax records and where that growth is and isn't. So some of it is still in development, and other pieces of it, some of that was related to non-taxable entities, things like the hospitals and universities as well.
And by the way, our office vacancy is like 10.3%. Greensboro is about 17%, so we're doing a lot better over here.
Ms. Scipio, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Scipio?
Yes, Mr. Tesh, the projections for salary, wages, and benefits, is that based on full employment?
So there is a salary savings adjustment built into the budget.
I see
We're going to
that.
have to go back a couple of slides on that one. Give me 1 second. Keep going, Sandy.
Keep going.
One more.
One more.
One more. I'm just kidding. I'm going to say one more about 2 or 3 more times. That's it right there.
Yeah.
So you see that top line that says salary, wages, and benefits would be the cost, full-time, part-time, and benefits for all of the employees in the general fund. And then in the FY23 column for salary savings adjustment, about $4 million of attrition expected. So it is an increase from a prior year based on the amount of turnover that we have, but the net cost of personnel does include an adjustment downward based on vacancy.
All right. So positions that are still vacant, we are planning to fill them if we can, and they're budgeted in the budget, but
Councilor, all positions are budgeted, and we're aggressively trying to fill positions. We just had a fairly successful job fair with probably 40 to 50 offers in the works at the moment. But yeah, all positions are. But that top number is full budgeting for all positions, and we just based on what we know about turnover and the difficulty right now in filling positions. You've got about a 2.5% salary savings amount factored in, and right now for this current year it's much worse than that as far as but our vacancy rate's much worse, and so the salary savings is much higher. But our goal is to get to the point where I'd much rather come to you and say, we're at full employment.
Okay.
We need to do something.
thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much, Mr. Tesh. I would just mention a number that I suspect most people couldn't guess, but our tax base is $26 billion. That's a big number. And I'm assuming that doesn't include the nonprofits?
No,
Would not include nonprofits?
that's the taxable tax base.
Just taxable base, and we think the nonprofits is 14%.
It has been a while since we've run those numbers, but
We
it
probably
was,
have a $30 billion property tax base. It's a lot of bricks. Anyway, thank you very much, folks. That is it for this evening. It is 5:45. Public safety begins at 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
With that, we are adjourned. Thank everybody for coming.